It might be hard to believe that a government body would wage war against a group of large flightless birds, but that's exactly what the Australian government did in 1932 to cull native emu populations across the country. Largely unsuccessful, this operation lasted 3 months before—
Dude, that's not the video topic.
Wait, what?
Yes, the war on emos, not the war on emus.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, wrong topic.
Alright, let me just fix that real quick. Alternative subcultures form an ecosystem of their own, and while one may take prominence over another in any given decade, there's typically an understanding that these groups are founded on the expression of individuality, the rejection of conformity, and the questioning of social constructs. They're also typically influenced by music and art. So what happens when a new alternative community crops up that's viewed as nothing more than a commercialised fad by the other subcultures? Emo being viewed as a danger to society by mainstream media was nothing new. Similar had happened to the other alt subcultures before it. But the hatred shown towards emos by other alternative subcultures was more extreme than any of the internal wars that had come before it. This really came to a head in Mexico in the year 2008, where anti-emo sentiments became so extreme that hate groups formed, mostly in the form of punks, who viewed emos as posers who were not only copying them but also threatening their values through a commercialised fad. As harassment developed into violent attacks, it raised a lot of questions around prejudice and identity regarding youth subculture in the country. Before we go any further, you might be wondering, what is a subculture? What is a punk? What is an emo? Who are we? Why are we here? What does it all mean? According to the Oxford English Dictionary, a subculture is defined as an identifiable subgroup within society or group of people, especially one characterised by beliefs or interests at variance with those of the larger group, the distinctive ideas, practices, or way of life of such a subgroup. In other words, a smaller group within society that differentiates by aesthetics, political beliefs, everyday practices, etc. Subcultures that have been considered under the bracket of alternative began to crop up as a form of self-expression and in some cases rebellion as early as the 1960s. Some of the first countercultural subcultures include hippies, mods, and rude boys, and counterculture would continue to grow and evolve over the following decades. As the name would suggest, the punk subculture originated from the punk rock music genre in New York and London in the 1970s. Created as a rebellion against the affluence that was associated with mainstream rock music at the time, some staples in the sound of punk, at least for this time, included short song length, basic song arrangements using a small amount of chords, and lyrics that were frequently politically charged or filled with social critiques. Born out of 1960s garage rock and a genre of rock music that is considered proto-punk in hindsight, the genre has become a pillar in the history of music and has gone on to influence a number of other underground genres, such as indie rock, crossover thrash, and even certain metal subgenres. The ideology of the punk subculture typically values individual freedom and self-expression, with strong oppositions to authority, capitalism, and authoritarianism. While there is a small but vocal minority within the subculture who openly express far-right fascist views, this subsect is rejected by the punk subculture at large. While the early days of punk saw the rise of fashion staples such as combat boots, hair worn in mohawks or liberty spikes, plaid and animal print, leather and PVC clothing, and spikes and studs, fashion became less important and more toned down to specific subgenres as they grew and evolved. For example, Keith Morris of the Circle Jerk said of the rise of hardcore punk in the 80s, "The punk scene was basically based on English fashion, but we had nothing to do with that. Black Flag and the Circle Jerks were so far from that. We looked like the kid who worked at the gas station or submarine shop." Hardcore hasn't been the only subgenre split off from punk. Other subgenres include pop punk, post-punk, and ska, and many of these subgenres have their own individual subcultures as well. I know we're kind of getting into Inception territory here, but please bear with me. A further genre would be born out of hardcore and post-hardcore in Washington DC in the mid-1980s. This subgenre, pioneered by bands such as Rites of Spring and Embrace, would pull from the sonics of post-hardcore and layer them with highly emotive, almost poetry-driven lyrics to create what was termed emotional hardcore, or emo for short. I'm gonna be honest guys, I find emo quite difficult to talk about because while it did centre around the DC hardcore scene in those early days, it's become a genre that's grown and encompasses so much, and it can be confusing to define. I'm sure you've all seen that real emo copypasta. It's a bit crazy to think how you could listen to an OG DC band like Grey Matter, a screamo band like Hawthorne Heights, an emo pop band like Paramore, a Midwest emo band like American Football, and then an emo rap artist like Lil Peep, and realise that despite the fact they all sound so different sonically, they all essentially have roots in the same movement. Emo first began to gain mainstream recognition around 2002, as pop punk began to replace nu metal as the marketable rock genre. As I'm sure you guys are aware, only one is allowed at a time, I don't make the rules. This was largely thanks to the success of Jimmy Eat World's album Bleed American, especially the single The Middle. This mainstream recognition would peak in the mid-2000s when emo pop would grow into the mainstream and become super popular. In other words, emo bands that sonically resembled pop punk of the early 2000s a lot more than they resembled the genre's hardcore roots. These are the names that are still most associated with the genre today, and definitely the bands that had the most connection with that 2000s emo subculture. Paramore, Panic at the Disco, Fall Out Boy and My Chemical Romance were absolutely inescapable during this period, birthing multiple iconic music videos, platinum-selling records, and absolutely iconic singles that remain a staple of alternative club nights up until today. This success in the 2000s is also the point in time where a new subculture completely separate to emo's hardcore roots would form. While emo fashion prior to the mainstream breakthrough had been understated and somewhat inspired by geek culture, the 2000s emo subculture was very fashion-centric and prioritised skinny jeans, band t-shirts, Converse sneakers or Vans, wristbands and thick black eyeliner. There were of course the iconic haircuts, usually dyed black, with long fringes that hung in the eyes and were sometimes cut into layers as well. Piercings were super common, especially snake bites and stretched ears. This is giving me serious flashbacks to when I was young and googling how to be emo. While it is quite ridiculous looking back, this subculture was hugely controversial, associated with social isolation, self-harming, suicidal behaviour. It gained a ton of negative attention in both mainstream media and in alternative spaces, leading to a huge amount of stigma and even violent attacks. Heavily associated with the newly developing concept of social media, especially the website MySpace, teenagers and young adults worldwide were catching on to the music and fashion of emo. A lot of the staples of emo fashion, such as men wearing eyeliner and skinny jeans, were not yet commonplace in Mexico when the subculture achieved mainstream popularity and began to arise in the youth of the country. Other alternative subcultures in Mexico, including metalheads, skinheads, goths, and of course punks, viewed emo as a fashion-based subculture and therefore superficial, both appropriating from and parodying the alternative subcultures that had come before it. Anti-emo sentiments became widespread throughout Mexico due to all of these negative associations that I've mentioned. The subculture was discussed unfavourably in the media, forums and groups targeting emos began to crop up online, and emos were harassed endlessly in person. For example, the Tianguis Cultural del Chapo market, known locally as El Chapo, is a popular hangout spot for all alternative subcultures in Mexico City. But when emos attempted to make a space for themselves there, they were effectively ran out. When they attempted to hang out in other areas so as not to be harassed, such as the Glorieta de los Insurgentes roundabout area, this still angered the other subcultures because they viewed it as the emos spreading around the city. By the way guys, I'm so sorry if I butcher any of the Spanish in this video, I've literally never spoken it in my life. It's been widely acknowledged in hindsight that a lot of this hatred stemmed from the fact that male emos were viewed as effeminate. Hatred in the form of homophobia was absolutely rife in Mexico at the time. Isolated attacks on emos began to occur, such as death threats and emos having their large bangs cut from their faces. Things would only escalate as the emo subculture began to grow more popular in the country. Online hatred for emos in Mexico began to translate more and more into real life. This was largely thanks to chain emails organising attacks on emos, hate forums hosted on websites like Last.fm, and macho attitudes displayed by a lot of punks and metalheads. This was the point where the isolated attacks became more and more organised. On March 7th, 2008, Querétaro City would become the battleground of emos against a gathered group of around 800 people who were described as disliking the emo look and attitude. 3 emos, who bear in mind were literally teenagers, were injured in physical attacks, leading police to arrest a total of 28 people. Just the following week in Mexico City, punks and other anti-emo groups stormed the emos' new hangout spot of Glorieta de los Insurgentes roundabout to recreate the events that had gone down in Querétaro City the week before. What started off in the two sides hurling verbal abuse at one another rapidly escalated into physical violence, with fights breaking out and people hitting each other with belts. Despite over 100 police officers intervening, they were completely outnumbered by the double on both sides, and this mass brawl waged on for most of the day. The violence only started to de-escalate when the monks of the Hare Krishna movement, a Hindu organisation, invited both sides of the confrontation to chat along with them. Alongside the emos, they also frequented the roundabout on Saturdays to sing. Is that not the most surreal thing you've ever heard? That morning, the emos had gathered at Glorieta de los Insurgentes to supposedly form a peaceful demonstration between all the subcultures. However, this grouping of them together in the one place proved the perfect opportunity for an organised attack.
I wish that I could bake a cake made out of rainbows and smiles and we'd all eat, be happy.
She doesn't even go here!
That incident in Mexico City would definitely prove the climax of the war between the two groups. However, the whole hatred and situation would go out kicking and screaming over the next few months before dying down entirely. In Tijuana, emos received a warning to not attend the city's annual fair in April of 2008. Smaller instances were also reported in multiple other cities. The widespread attacks on emos throughout the country received national media coverage. Some groups of emos did host demonstrations in their various cities demanding more respect. Like in many other countries, the emo subculture became less and less popular in Mexico as the 2010s approached, both due to emos outgrowing the subculture, but also due to it falling out of the mainstream. Emo evolved massively during the 2010s, largely due to the arrival of websites like Tumblr and a new wave of bands like 21 Pilots, but that's a topic for another day. Nonetheless, while the hype and notoriety around emo faded, these incidents remain cemented in the subcultural history of Mexico as a bizarre memory. Did every city just have that spot where the alternative people would gather? Like, is that just a worldwide thing? I got a lot of really amazing Riot Girl band recommendations in the comment of my last video, so if we could keep it going in this video and comment your favorite emo band, I would really like that. Also, thank you all so much. My subscribers literally doubled after that video. I'm honestly so speechless and I'm so thankful. Like, each and every one of you, thank you so much. Thank you for all of your support. Please drop a like on this video if you enjoyed it. It really does help out. It's genuinely so strange knowing that tensions like this existed between the different subcultures, because pretty much anyone I know who's alternative today, whether they be like a metalhead, a punk, whatever, especially the girls, they all went through an emo phase as a teenager first. It's almost like a rite of passage. Anyways guys, thank you so much for watching. Please drop a sub if you want to join. We've built a really nice little community for ourselves here and I'm so pleased with that. I'll be sure to catch you in my next video guys. Bye!